Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday to all of you. Welcome to the Morning Update Show. I am your co-host, Trey Holiday. And before I throw it over to my co-host, Big O, I gotta give a birthday shout out to a community icon legend in the making, Mr. KY King Garrett. Happy Earth Day. Happy birthday, my friend. You are one of the people that I think so many people know and look to in terms of your leadership in community, your connections in community. I hope you're enjoying your day. What's up, Big O? Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day to you.
Yeah.
Man,
Middle of the week, my friend.
man, I'm looking forward to that downward slope towards the rest of the week.
Right.
Man, well, at least the sun is out today, though.
Exactly. It was a beautiful drive coming into the city. You know what I'm saying? Anytime the sun gets out on these March days, just like we experienced on Monday, I'm feeling good.
Right. Well, want to take this opportunity, want to welcome you here to the Morning Update Show and tell you this is a great time right now to tag and share the stream. Share the stream with people who could appreciate culturally relevant news and information emanating here from the Emerald City. We got a few headlines here today. Actually, we got a bit of a shorter show today. We got some production going on right after. But we got some national headlines, and we'll jump right into it here. FBI Director Wray said what we kind of knew all along about this insurrection in Washington, D.C. He's labeled it as domestic terrorism.
The January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol was an act of domestic terrorism. That's the official word now from the FBI Director himself, Christopher Wray. He testified before a Senate panel today for the first time since the insurrection. Director Wray told lawmakers he was appalled by the deadly attack and admitted that the agency needs to get better at gathering intelligence on domestic terrorists. The FBI director also noted who was not at the insurrection. He shot down the baseless claims that rioters were some sort of Antifa members or fake Trump protesters.
Has there so far been any evidence that the January 6th riot here, the insurrection, was organized by people simply posing as supporters of President Trump?
We have not seen any evidence of that.
So far, Wray says the FBI has arrested more than 270 suspects connected to the insurrection. He added that his agents are looking into roughly 2,000 domestic terrorism cases.
There we go. And thank you, Mr. Wray, for just putting out that truth, man. Oftentimes, folks like yourself really are not the ones to say this. So I'm so glad, honestly, to hear this and to also knock down those false claims about it being Antifa. Folks are saying it was BLM protesters. So I just love that, again, the truth comes out there. I think you're absolutely right in how you set this up. Oh, many of us in community knew this was coming.
Yeah, you don't even have to be from community. Like most Americans, people around the world who watch this don't. I mean, this is exactly what it is. It's domestic terrorism. Actually, if you go back 1 year, we've played this clip now twice on the Morning Update Show. Director Wray said that one of the biggest threats to America is domestic terrorism driven by white supremacy movements.
Yeah.
And the thing that we find though is that sometimes in this country, when people have to look at themselves in the mirror, they don't like what they see and want to make it shift blame to someone else. And what's interesting about what's coming out here in Washington D.C. is it's a cross cut across American society. So yeah, you have people self-proclaimed extremists who probably do extremist stuff every day. But some of these people who've been arrested and charged out there are school teachers. They're your banker. They're your nurse. You see what I'm saying? I mean, and these are people that were actively involved in not only an insurrection, but an act of domestic terrorism. And that's something to sit and think about. A lot of these people and some of these 2,000 cases that they're pursuing are everyday people. It could be your teller at the bank who was out there, you know what I'm saying, committing this act of domestic terrorism.
Yeah, well, we saw that too, as so much more details have been coming out. It's showcasing the wide variety of people that thought, you know what, I got to utilize my energy to be out there on this day, causing this kind of terrorism to our country and to our nation, whether they were trying to block the boats or block the count, whatever it was. Ultimately, we all saw how it played out, and they have to atone for that.
Yeah, well, one thing about these people is they are exactly who we thought they were. And they attempted and did temporarily exactly what they said they were going to do. They said that they were going to go there and disrupt the certification of the vote. And that's exactly what happened. Now, of course, the Capitol was regained, and the certification proceeded, but they telegraphed this well in advance. Say, hey, we're coming January 6th, and we're going to stop the certification. And that's exactly what they did. And, in doing so, I mean, of course, that is insurrection. That is an act of domestic terrorism. And here it is. This is Director Wray, director of the FBI, who's been giving this warning, by the way. He's been saying that this threat is out there. And, he's called this what it is. And just the fact that there's so much shifting on the fact the fact that like it's there's still people in Congress who are like, oh no, these were like real peaceful people, and it was this and that, and everything else. And I contend the people who went to the rally at the Ellipse, man, they went to a rally, fine. The people who crossed those barricades, I mean, this is something totally different.
Yeah.
And you heard people in Congress being like, oh, well, it was peaceful people who were inside the Capitol. It was just a few people, whatever, but they were inside the Capitol. What were they doing inside the Capitol?
Yeah.
How they get across the line?
Yeah, and it's hard to say. We see this now play out. I mean, look at the way that criminal cases play out. If you are driving your friend to the bank and your friend commits a robbery at that bank, you are liable. You may not have known that friend was going to commit that robbery, but ultimately you are also charged. And this is really the way that I like to look at this, because those who cross that barrier, it doesn't matter why they thought they were crossing that barrier. Ultimately, that right there is where they really went left.
Right. No, 100%. And the blame shifting on this, like I said, it continues, and people just need to own. They need to own it. You know what I'm saying? When I guess BLM is a bad term. It's so ambiguous, but whatever. The BLM protesters do something that's like when you own it. Like these guys need to just own this. And the bigger thing is as Americans, we need to just see ourselves for who we are, and people need to realize that there is a faction that's actually very large. I'm not one of those people who are like, well, half of America feels that it's this and that. No, the majority of Americans, regardless, black, white, and different, Republican or Democrat, saw what happened in Washington, D.C. and was like, man, this is crap.
Yeah.
But there is a growing element that's out there. It's a lot of people who are just it's a lot of elements. You got some elements that are just totally anti-government. Don't matter who's in. They just hate the government. You know what I'm saying? Then you got some people, you got QAnon, you got the supporters. It's a hodgepodge. But man, these people did this, and these people are domestic terrorists.
Yeah. And, honestly, I love what you just said there, because I have conversations with folks all across the spectrum. And ultimately, there are many, many people who understand that in order for us to bear witness to our hoarded past, to what just transpired earlier this year, is such a crescendo of so much of that hatred that has been, showing itself out in microaggressions in your workplace, in schools. I mean, when you are at, a barista and you realize, well, hey, they treated the person in front of me that was, not my same race. They treated them better than what I'm getting. I'm getting, like a quarter of that same kind of hospitality. That it plays out in other areas, but ultimately there are so many more of us. And this is really my belief, that there are more who actually see that we as Americans do have humanity, and that we want to rest on that side of it. Well,
of course, of course we do. And I mean, just something that people should remember, that these domestic terrorists, the majority of them that are being charged, these are not people who are just camped out in a bunker waiting for January 6th. These are people that intertwine with you in everyday life. And that's why like these kind of issues need to be addressed. I mean,
yeah,
this might be a whole
period.
show in itself.
Well, no, I think you're right, because so much we were right here, man, doing long-term coverage on that. And I remember, Jake was over there going, oh my gosh. I mean, just the reactions as things were playing out. We saw it all. And ultimately, we have to be able to reconcile with all of the various ways that people feel about this country in order for us to actually make it great. I think that if we try to sweep it under the rug or act like it doesn't exist, man, we're going to be in for more of that to come.
Best thing we can ever do is just own our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, man. Just own it. And it's too much. We find that, and the thing is, we find the same kind of thing, not on that scale, but we find the same kind of thing here, even in our dear Emerald City. There's so many things that kind of been swept to the side, painted over, rose-colored glasses, and everything else. Man, our history, it is what it is. My mama always says that, forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past. We can't have no better past. Past is the past. We just got to own it.
That's right. That's right.
All right, keeping it on the national front, Texas made news yesterday. Texas and Mississippi getting rid of the mask mandate.
Health officials are warning Americans not to let their guard down as state and local governments scale back coronavirus restrictions with vaccination efforts ramping up nationwide. Yesterday, Texas announced that it is lifting its mask mandate and that businesses will soon be able to operate at 100% capacity. Deborah Alfarone is on Capitol Hill and has more on the concerns from health officials that these rollbacks are happening way too soon and way too quickly. Deborah, what can you tell us?
I can tell you, Anne-Marie, that the director of the CDC, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, says we're just not there yet, not there to have all these rollbacks of restrictions. You take the variants and also the leveling off of cases, and she thinks that any ground that we've gained, we could lose.
To open Texas 100%.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott is removing all coronavirus restrictions and ending the mask mandate 1 week from today.
Removing state mandates does not end personal responsibility.
Health experts are concerned since less than 7% of the state's population is fully vaccinated.
A variety of COVID-19 variants are not only circulating around the world, but have found their foothold in North Texas as well.
Businesses can still enforce their own rules.
I'm concerned about my staff's safety.
Restaurant owners like Cesar Zepeda now have decisions to make.
I'm leaning towards having my staff still wear masks and maybe require anybody that comes here.
The Lone Star State isn't alone when it comes to rolling back restrictions.
The governor's office is getting out of the business of telling people what they can and cannot do.
Mississippi ended its mask mandate. San Francisco now allows indoor dining, and Chicago eased restrictions on restaurants and bars.
Small turns of the dial are safe to do.
Here in Washington, President Biden announced a pharmaceutical partnership that would give the U.S. enough vaccine doses for every adult by the end of May.
Johnson & Johnson and Merck will work together to expand the production of Johnson & Johnson's vaccine.
President Biden is also hoping to offer every teacher and school worker at least one shot by the end of the month.
Right, and on that, they changed it now to where teachers here in the state of Washington can go ahead and get the vaccine. What do you think, though? Texas, Mississippi?
I mean, my goodness, it's one thing to have some rollbacks. And I think that our Governor Inslee, is doing a great job of these phases and opening things up in phases. At the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with doing a really safe and healthy approach. I mean, we saw what happened when we thought we kind of had this together, and folks said it. They said in the winter, these numbers are going to spike. And that's exactly what we saw, because people got too comfortable. They started to be like, well, maybe I don't need this. Maybe I don't need that. And ultimately, it created more coronavirus cases. So it's unfortunate that these states are not looking at what just transpired to learn from that. Again, this is, a newer virus for all of us. And it's important that we really be errant on the side of caution. I don't understand how the governor could say, we're not going to be, when we take this away, people still have their own personal responsibility. What kind of leadership are you setting? What kind of example are you providing for the residents of your state when you take off these restrictions? I just think, again, like that report just said there, I think this is way too soon.
Yeah, when we don't really, sitting here in Seattle, we don't really have a representative view of the people who are dying down south, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, North Carolina. The rate of Black people who are dying of coronavirus is at some points 3 times higher. You see what I'm saying? In Texas, to be honest with you, Houston, been down there a few times, it never really closed. I'll be honest with you. You know what I'm saying? And mask enforcement, like around national chains, national brands and things like that, you saw like mask enforcement, but like small mom and pop shops, things like that, it's something unique that we're experiencing here in Seattle and in King County as far as the mask compliance and everything else. But that's also why Seattle has the lowest rate of 30 biggest cities in America, and so does King County. King County, lowest rate. And so, I mean, we'll see. It's a lot of people talking about they on their way to Texas.
Wow. I mean, I understand there's a lot of folks that are like ready to break out. This has been hitting all of us so differently in terms of like our social engagement. That's what's taken such a huge hit, not only in the business sector, and I get that, but we are social beings. I understand that, but man, we gotta be safe out here, man. We gotta be careful. I would not be going to Texas at all right now if I was you.
Texas is getting ready to be popping. like for real. People have been waiting to like go somewhere and get out and enjoy themselves in whatever setting. Governor Abbott is saying 100%, you know what I'm saying? So that's nightlife, that's everything. I don't know what the sports leagues are going to do, but saying 100%. Wow. Yeah. Interesting. All right, so we're bringing it back here to local news and headlines. And there's a lot of Black people running for office.
There we go.
We got a few things here. The first one is from the South Seattle Emerald. Let me bring this up. Don Bennett announces run for Kent mayor. The city of Kent has the largest population of Black residents in King County. Many Black residents in Kent moved there out of being pushed out of Seattle due to gentrification and rising house costs. This year, Dawn Bennett, a Black woman who has lived in Kent for the last 23 years, is running for mayor. Bennett has a long career in community advocacy and activism. She worked for Seattle Parks Department for over 25 years and has also worked for Seattle Public Schools and multiple nonprofits, one of which she founded that focuses on advocating for youth and communities throughout Washington. And this was written by our guy, Mike Davis of South Seattle Emerald. So Dawn Bennett announces run for Kent mayor.
I think it's a beautiful thing. I mean, when you talk about the diversity in Kent, I lived in Kent for a while. It's just huge diversity, and really needing that leading voice of the groups of diversity is important. It's imperative. So shout out to you, that you are running, Dawn, because honestly, this is necessary. I think that they need a voice. I love it. I gotta say, Black woman magic here. I'm gonna throw it in there. Because again, when you're talking about somebody who comes from community, been living there for over a couple of decades now, and really has her ear to the ground in terms of how community is moving, how it's shaping and forming, that's the kind of leadership that you want in the mayor's office.
Yeah, it's crazy because as a kid, you think Kent, you was like, man, that's deep. Black people out there, nothing, and now Kent, this is the biggest Black population here.
Yeah.
And it's growing and growing. And actually, we see more and more representation coming south.
Mm-hmm.
The further even in King County as well as Pierce County. You're talking about Marilyn Strickland. Yeah. You talk about these people who are here running for office. It's interesting. Who's the mayor in Federal Way?
A white guy.
Oh, okay. Did you vote for him?
You already told me not to be talking about who I voted for on camera. Now you want to know if I voted for him.
Just curious.
I think Federal Way is next, to be honest with you, because Federal Way's Black population is growing like crazy, like the weeds. And I think that there's a lot of great groups actually that are on the ground. When I think about Federal Way Youth Action Team, the Federal Way Black Collective, Jesse Johnson, came from Federal Way. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
That's why I was asking.
Yeah.
It seems like, some of these cities here in South King County, that, you know, you have more and more Black people running for public office.
Absolutely. And I think there's some great groups. And when we talk about just what we just shared there about Don Bennett, that's what we're talking about here. People that have been on the ground really trying to bring some new innovative solutions to the diversity that a lot of these South King County cities have experienced with kind of this Blaxodus from the Central District and the South. And yeah, from Seattle when it got too expensive, man, it wasn't their choice. But literally gentrification did push, you know, so many hundreds of families, thousands of families out of the city of Seattle. And hey, you know, it's time for some real diverse leadership in these cities. I'm loving to see that happen.
I think the mayor of Federal Way is Jim Farrell.
Somebody just got it? Yeah.
Allison put it in the comments there. All right, well, keeping it on elections and keeping it on Black women. From the Capitol Hill Seattle blog, Gonzalez aiming for mayor's office. Staffer Breonna Thomas makes bid for boss's seat on the city council. Breonna Thomas has steeped in the idea of service for much of her life. Her father served in the military, and the family volunteered at food banks on Saturdays. And now this is CapitolHillSeattle.com. It was written by Jake Goldstein Street. And basically, Breonna Thomas is a staffer for Lorena Gonzalez, who was here on the Morning Update show, who announced that she's running for mayor. And so, of course, her citywide seat is open. And one of the things that Breonna Thomas talks about is there's no Black representation currently on the Seattle City Council. Yeah. And so there's a Black woman here running for a citywide seat on the City Council. Experience coming from working in Councilmember Gonzalez's office.
Yeah, and you know what? I love that the article also points out the history here, that there's no Black representation on Seattle City Council since 1966. That is huge.
Yeah, Bruce Harrell.
Yeah, no, okay, Bruce Harrell. But see, they were talking about leadership too. And I think that that's important because if she's running for a certain seat and she's bringing that experience in, I think it's important that, you know, folks be able to understand where these candidates are coming from and what their strategy really is going to be about. Because just being a Black candidate isn't necessarily the end all be all. I think you have to also, like what Brianna was saying there, is that, look, being on the inside has afforded her with so much more understanding about how the council moves, seeing some of the gaps that are really needed in terms of connecting with community and being very genuine about that connection. I love how the article also expresses that, you know, Brianna's like, look, she's still on the bus. You know what I mean? She's like, look, I'm one of the people, you know, I still got student loan debt. I mean, some of those things that the article mentions, I think also makes her a great candidate too, in terms of just being somebody that is from the people, you know, not maybe, you know, fed with a silver spoon. Some folks in, you know, community are like, well, you know, a Black representation, like, what are you really bringing? And I think it's going to be important that any of these guys that are really running right now, you know, in terms of being Black, it's not just because you're Black, right? But it's because your lived experience, as Hamdi said yesterday, is going to like help usher you in with some new innovative measures.
Yeah.
They're needed, man.
Okay. Well, I hear you on some of that. Like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I agree that, like, so, you know, one thing that's interesting right now is would there be no Black people on the city council? Is there's nobody to check the city council? And so, you know, I mean, city council, a lot of times they're driven by Twitter. You know what I'm saying? They're driven by whoever's the loudest, instead of being like, man, you know what I'm saying? Here's the Black guy right here. Let's go talk to him. Because, I mean, there is nobody Black on city council. And right now, in this time of racial reckoning and everything else, there is no representation on the city council. And I think that even how all of this stuff is played out, you know, from the mayor's 100 million to everything else through city council, these guys, you know, I mean, I'm sure the council has done the best they could with the resources that they had or whatever, because there is nobody Black on the city council. You know, there is nobody who's like, yes, you know, I'm from the whatever, from the CD, from the South, and from, you know, any part of the city. And so, will we need somebody Black on the council the most? No, you know, nobody is there. But I would say this, is that I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong if somebody did go up with a silver spoon in their mouth. You know what I'm saying? You know, I don't think you necessarily, you know, I mean, lived experience is good, and Hamdi pointed that out, you know, yesterday and everything else. but I don't think that precludes you from just doing the right things. You know, whether you grew up poor or you grew up with wealth, and a lot of stuff just comes down to what's right for your constituents, what's right for the city, what's right. So
I agree with that. Oh, I think too that for me, and this is just me talking, right? I think for me, I really gravitate towards people who have, you know, an understanding of really what it means to make a way out of no way. And I think a lot of the times that ingenuity is so necessary when you're talking about being on a city council, being a mayor, being, you know, a leader in any of these cities. It's important that, you know, you're not only just bringing, when I talk about your lived experience, is that being rooted in that community. You know, we talk about gatekeeping all the time, and ultimately that is really a class issue. It boils down to those who have been able to be at these tables, seated at these tables down there in Olympia or whatever else, and kind of the backdoor dealings that have really not helped the Black community. So that's really what I'm talking about at the root of that.
Okay, but let's be clear though. We've got people who got lots of lived experience and had the most lived experience and who sold us out. So, you know what I'm saying? And you've got people who might not have the soul who's kept it real. So, you know, when you talk about backdoor dealing and everything else, life experience and everything doesn't necessarily preclude you from getting to that table and selling out the community.
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes it makes you run to that table.
Yeah, you run to the table faster. You be like, whoa, man,
got to get out of these lived experiences situations. I'm trying to, you know, set something up for my kids. I think you're right. And I think that there is no one way about this, right? Ultimately, there's no one way that makes it right or better. You know, we're just talking about the variety here.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what's important. I'll be honest with you. So, you know, there's the rumor that Bruce Harrell might put his name in the hat for mayor. So, you know, it'll be interesting as well. Brings a lot of experience. He was also Councilmember Gonzalez was president, Council President Gonzalez actually, and so was Council President Harrell. And actually, he was mayor for like 2 weeks or something, like some kind of parliamentary thing. So that might be interesting. But I'm gonna tell you, I would tell people keep your eye on these citywide seats. Yeah. Because I think that for people who are really trying to break into the system here, the race for mayor is going to be, but for these citywide seats, I think they're going to be real competitive. I think that you're going to get more names that come out here for the citywide seats. I think that there's going to be more of an appetite for people, constituents here to take maybe a risk on an unknown or this and that. They wouldn't take that same risk for mayor. You see what I'm saying? But they might take that same kind of risk for a citywide city council candidate. And so, man, yeah, I wouldn't get too comfortable. I mean, clearly there's one open seat with Gonzalez running for mayor, but you know, I think Mosqueda has the other seat, right? Don't get too comfortable, council member. You know, it's a lot of people. Those are citywide seats, man. I mean, they're, you know, it's competitive. I'm not running for anything, but if I ran for something, I'd run citywide for city council.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And be able to go into different neighborhoods and drum up that support, right? Because mayor right now, coming out of COVID, coming out of this recovery and all these other things, that's such a pivotal position. I think that people are really going to be laser tuned in on the mayor and the mayor that they select, you know what I'm saying, moving forward. And people have more of an appetite for risk around city council.
Yeah, I think you're actually making a really valid point here. And clearly, you know, there is diversity that's needed at that citywide level. I think Mosqueda has been trying to do what she can. I think President Gonzalez was trying to do what she could. But ultimately, I really do think that a lot of our cities here, when we talk about where we are right now, this precipice, the energy from, you know, community members out there citywide, all communities, right? We saw it. We saw it come to that crescendo during the CHOP era, all these people out in the streets. And ultimately, there's a real need for diversity in the voices at the citywide level. I agree.
Yeah, JP had a good comment in here. It was like, man, we need to base our vote on policy. And that's where Black people get bamboozled, shamshuckled, run amok, led astray, because we forget about policy. And now oftentimes we vote against our best interest time and time again, because this is what the party says, or this is whatever. I think that, man, these upcoming elections, we really need to be like, man, what is your hardcore policy for that's going to impact Black people in our city?
Yeah.
And people need to, because you know what, man, the BIPOC song and dance is old. Here's some free advice to anybody running for public office. BIPOC's become like mad ambiguous. You see what I'm saying? It's like everybody but white. You feel me? Like basically, the way that the term is used here in Seattle. And even the people in the, say, BIPOC umbrella are like, they're looking for specific policies. It's not just Black people. You know what I'm saying? Our Native brothers and sisters are like, okay, man, what policies can be can be put in place to impact this metric A, B, and C, right? And you know, I mean, it's the same thing that Black people should be talking about. It's the same thing. There's a lot of things they're impacting our Asian American community. You know what I'm saying? And even things down there in the CID. And so people throw out this thing like, oh, we're going to support BIPOC and we love. What exactly though? It's like, man, the smoke and mirror days is over with. You know what I'm saying? Let's get down to the meat and potatoes of it. What exactly are you going to do? What exactly is your policy? I don't know. Maybe other people just let the politicians get away with that. But, you know, like for us, we want to know.
Yeah.
What exactly are you going to do for our community?
That's right. And you know what? I love that you even point this out, because smoke and mirrors, man, we need brass tacks. And ultimately, I think that it's important that a lot of young voters understand this is not a popularity contest either. You really want to be voting for somebody who, when they talk about the policies that they're going to be pushing for, new legislation, the ways that they're going to bring their experience to the table, it's important that we understand what that actually means on the ground level. A lot of stuff, unfortunately, gets stuck up here in bureaucracy land, and it doesn't really hit the bottom community, it doesn't hit the ground. And so a lot of folks now are going to be like, nah, man, how is that going to hit the ground? How is this economic recovery plan really going to help shape up our businesses, shape up our communities once again? I mean, so many cities now, not just or neighborhoods, not just the Central District, have been wrecked by gentrification. And there are so many different groups that are working on innovative solutions. How are those things going to become a part of the plan? How are we going to listen to the experts that have been doing a lot of the work to showcase some of the innovative measures that can be used at a citywide level, at a community level, even to really start to affect some change? I think you're right. Oh man, we can't be shunned by the popularity contest anymore.
Yeah, let's be clear. Black people have been in constant decline in the city of Seattle for decades, right? Constant decline. And so, you know, I mean, it's really about time that Black people are really holding people accountable on the policy level. And we see like, but because of for this crime against humanity against George Floyd, and then the protest that came out after that, everything else was more of a spotlight on policy and everything else. People are paying attention about what's in Olympia, and people are paying attention. And this is what I'm saying. But a big part of this is our fault, us as Black people. Like I said, we put it on autopilot. We trusted these people downtown. We trusted these city councils and these mayors, excuse me, and all these other people to have our best interest. And guess what, Black folks? We got played.
Mm-hmm.
We got played decade after decade after decade. And that's why when you look at almost any single metric in the city of Seattle over the last 30 years, Black people are in decline. When you talk about household income, when you talk about property ownership, when you talk about how our children are doing in school, that's because we didn't hold these people accountable. And that's because, well, Pastor said that we're going to vote for so-and-so. And, you know, you never know what Pastor, you know, Pastor got a plug somewhere. You know what I'm saying? He's getting hooked up with a grant. You know, does he really have your best interest? Pastor got, you know, he's secured income. We sitting up there and we put it on autopilot, and we've gone to the pulpit and let some people lead us. You know what I'm saying? And other people lead us, and we put accountability. Our preachers tell us who to vote for, and then we've left the accountability with the preacher, not knowing if the preacher is going to actually hold the politician accountable for his flock. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? We've outsourced accountability for too long. I would say this: anybody running for city council, anybody running for mayor, we coming for you for accountability, not in a bad way, but we coming for you for accountability, specifically to our community. Please don't respond back with BIPOC, this and that. We want to talk to you about Black issues in the Black community.
Yeah, period. And this goes back to what we just experienced with Mayor Durkin. I mean, originally it was $100 million for the Black community. Then it was $100 million for the BIPOC community. Now we're seeing it getting whittled down. It's $30 million with the task force, the mayor's task force. It's $30 million with the PB process, which, let's be real here, that PB process means that everybody in the city really gets the chance to say what they think the money should go towards. But how is that direct investment in Black communities? I mean, I think there's a lot of things that we as Black folks really need to take ownership of. And again, not be swayed by popularity here and the relationships that we hold with folks who tell us something. It's on us to read between the lines, read that fine print, and make sure that we understand exactly what somebody is standing for and how it's going to benefit us, period, point blank.
And I'm going to keep it real. Bring this camera up, please. I'm going to keep it real. Y'all need to start questioning and challenging these preachers. Like, on the real deal. You know what I'm saying? You need to do a candidate forum up there. Bring these candidates into the church. Ask these hard questions, man, because we just been misled by so many different people, so many different ways. Now, of course, not all preachers and not all religious leaders and everything else, but man, we've seen like time and time again, any way that people can, mislead, divert, tell, oh, we got it. We're going to endorse this candidate. Nah, man, who got the best policy for us? And that's really where we need to be at. Thank you, JP, for bringing that up in the comments there, because if we look at this track record, nobody should be going in the city council, especially if they're going to, well, I mean, Shauna's not up for election, but if you represent D3 or D2, that's Sawant and Morales. And if anybody who's running for citywide, nobody should be able to hold their head up high about what's happened with Black people in D3 and D2, so whether it's those district representatives or citywide, because they also now represent D2 and D3, when Black people have been in constant decline in this city, this is a lift. And men lie, women lie, other people lie. The numbers don't lie.
They don't lie. And I think that's why so many of us are beginning to understand these numbers even more. And I think it's important that we do that. At the end of the day, we have been in decline, as Omari's saying. And I think that so many more people need to be able to dissect these numbers, understand how to hold people accountable, especially when we have new folks coming in that say that they want to do something specifically for the Black community, doing something specifically for Indigenous community. It's oftentimes, if you look at any of these numbers, it is Black and it is Indigenous folks that are at the bottom, period, point blank. And so we cannot deny those numbers anymore. We really got to hold these folks accountable and hold ourselves accountable.
Yeah. And you guys just stop throwing this BIPOC word around, man. It's played now. You know what I'm saying?
Enough.
It's like you're doing the Running Man or something. It's played out.
It's played out.
All right. BIPOC's had its run here in the city and everything else. Let's start actually addressing specific communities and their needs. And yeah, this is don't come out and Converge throw it around this BIPOC thing, man, because we're gonna get to the heart of the issue. I got one more thing here. This is from King 5. It's a young man out in Linwood. We're talking about people running for office. A young man out in Linwood running for city council, 21 years old.
Joshua Binda is barely old enough to buy a beer, but he's running for Linwood City Council. It would make him the youngest African American ever elected to office in Washington, but for him, that's just the beginning.
Linwood in a way changed my life in a way. It gave me an opportunity to seek a better education, to seek a better life.
The product of Liberian immigrants who literally won a lottery to come to America, Joshua Binda soon learned life here wouldn't be as easy as he dreamed.
I've been pulled over a lot by the police. I've experienced racism and people calling me the N-word. I've experienced racism on every level possible, I would say.
It was the murder of George Floyd last summer that inspired Binda to organize protest rallies around his community, as well as meet with mayors and police chiefs, hoping to foster a better understanding.
I think it definitely fueled my passion for wanting to seek justice and wanting to seek help for people of color, and me being African American just brought that to an even more personal level for me.
But while others in the Black Lives Matter movement saw a system so broken it needed to be torn down, Binda made a commitment to change it from the inside. Just days ago, he filed with the state to run for Linwood City Council. At 21, 21, he says he'd be the youngest council member ever elected in Linwood and the youngest African American elected in the state.
This is a lifelong battle. And I think as the generations as we've grown more and more older, we've realized that it is our place to implement the change we want for our future.
Why do you think you can work within the system and actually fix it?
In order to change that, we have to change things that have been built within our system to begin with.
The former Kamiak High School football star will soon be studying political science at UW-Bothell. And if elected, Binda hopes he's an inspiration to others in his generation to take on the system and change it for good.
And I'm just thinking about being the person that can be a catalyst for other young people to say, hey, we're not too young to change things. We're not too young to change our community.
The primary for Linwood City Council is in August. If he advances, Binda would then go on to the general election in November. In Linwood, Eric Wilkinson, King 5 News.
All right, there's another one right here. I just want to pass it over to you, but someone was like, man, isn't the Latino, Latinx community, aren't they struggling as well? That's exactly the point, that when people go and just throw everything under BIPOC, we're not able to dissect specifically these needs here. What do you think of this young man, though?
You know, I mean, I love that he is saying, look, I'm hoping to be a catalyst for young people to see themselves again. As I have been saying, each one of us is a part of the solution, you guys. What he is doing right there in Linwood is a huge feat. You know, not only about his age, but it's about him saying, I see something broken and I want to be a part of the way to fix it. That's what it's about. And I think that right now, I've been saying this, we're in a precipice, in a zeitgeist, a sign of the times, where we have a system that's already built. We understand that it's not broken. It's actually working the way it's supposed to work. So how do we change it from the inside while finding ways of building up new systems that are more inclusive of people's needs? As Omari is saying here, when we throw around a term like BIPOC, unfortunately, if money goes here, money goes there, it ends up getting shadowed. And what we do not need is another decades, more and more decades of declines in these communities that have suffered declines over the last decades. So ultimately, I love that he is putting his name in the hat there in Linwood. You know what? If I was a Linwoodian, I would be supporting this right here. You know what I mean?
Linwoodian?
Linwoodian, you know, if I just lived in Linwood, you know? Yeah, I mean, I love this because we need to see more young people actually seeing themselves as a part of the solution. This is what I've been saying. I think it does not only rest with our elders or those who are, you know, just, you know, been adults for many years. You know, I won't name our ages, but, you know, literally, I love that this 21-year-old, somebody who's lived in Linwood for a long time and experienced certain things around racist practices, that he's saying, you know what, I'm not going to stand on the sidelines anymore. I'm going to figure out a way to be a part of the solution. Man, kudos to you, young brother.
All right. I guess you said it all. Yeah, well, you know, we'll see what happens there. I mean, he's put his name in the hat, and yeah, we'll see what happens. This is unfortunate here. We're gonna skim over. We got a few more headlines, and then we've got another clip here. But King County Sheriff's Captain suspended for a day for offensive Facebook post about black teens. A member of the King County Sheriff Mitzi Johannichik's command staff, who was involved in the controversial 2017 shooting death of a 17-year-old black teen in Des Moines during a misguided sting operation, was suspended for a day without pay after a colleague complained Captain Todd Miller had made a very offensive and racist Facebook post. Basically, part of this was he put up a picture of some black teens. Looks like they were in a fight or they were stealing some sneakers. And then he said in his comments, animals, this is what inner city gives us these days. So deputy is, or a captain. Wow. After a colleague complained, captain.
Wow.
With the sheriff's office, suspended for a day.
I mean, you know what? Okay. Suspended for a day, but does that change the ideology when he comes back the next day? That's just my question. Inherently, it's that you guys, the ideologies of people that are supposed to be protecting citizens, that is what we're talking about here when we talk about uprooting the ideology. It is not something that can be done through, more and more training. This is why folks were out there in the streets, in the droves, by the thousands, because ultimately, when we understand that this is the ideology of someone like a captain, then what does it mean for those who are beneath him? How many microaggressions are others experiencing? How much is really going on that's not being reported? Kudos to the officer who said, you know what, this is offensive and I have to say something. Kudos to you, because oftentimes what a lot of folks like regular citizens experience is that it's a police versus a citizen mentality. And this right here showcases that ideology that is just permeating sometimes through a lot of cops and a lot of unfortunately a lot of these systems that we now see as systems of oppression, honestly and ultimately. And my thing is it's great that he was suspended for a day, but what does it mean in terms of the continuation of his career? I mean, that's what.
Yeah, there's a complaint going too, because guys, I mean, it's these police forces here in Seattle and probably across the country. We're actually going to have a representative here speaking about this. Is like there's all kinds of complaints with black officers as well that are complaining. Other officers wearing inflammatory clothing and shirts and some everything else. You got to remember, so Seattle Police Department, 40% of complaints come from officers, right? So 40% of the complaints that OPA gets comes from officers. Just like the very first people who were out there at the in Washington D.C., that was another officer, who came with a complaint. So it's turmoil inside of these organizations. We see these people on the streets all in the same uniform and everything else, but it's going to be real interesting, I think, to see what continues to come out in some of these police forces, because what we see on the street when the police respond or sitting there on the line and everything else isn't necessarily exactly what's happening there in those locker rooms, and some of everything else where these officers are at. And you hear these things come out, it's just kind of drip, drip, drip. But believe me, there's actually a flood, and soon enough, I'll leave it like that. Wow. Soon enough, it's going to be out. This was something that you talked about last week. And before we end this segment, and this was good, we've been talking for almost an hour. Every time we say we're getting out of here early. I know. But I think this was something you were telling everybody about. The Black Joy Festival celebrates culture and community at Othello Park. These are our partners from the South Seattle Emerald, from Ronnie Estecu. Yeah. How'd it go?
This is beautiful, because honestly, this is what we're talking about when we say that ultimately there is a way to support Black businesses through these marketplace events. It's important that we get out there and support small business any way that we can. And I'm just happy that groups are getting together to bring opportunities to these vendors. So many oftentimes, honestly, I peruse every single vendor at all of these marketplace events. I peruse every single one because they have great products. And I love the fact that we're going to be, as the weather starts to permit it, we're going to see more and more of these kinds of events. And I just love that there's a way that we can showcase to, the larger community of Seattle and King County that we got your back when we pull these events together and that we bring vendors out. I love that they wrote about it in the South Seattle Emerald. Great job, guys.
All right, I think we're just going to keep it rolling here. We got a few more things. I see my mom is watching, and my mom was still is, even though Jacob Lawrence has passed away back in 2000, a big Jacob Lawrence fan. So many people across America are. Someone found a long lost piece of Jacob Lawrence art. Again, this clip right here comes from King 5.
Like history, like art, this is a pretty exciting discovery. A second panel from artist Jacob Lawrence's series entitled Struggle from the History of the American People has turned up after 6 decades. A woman found it in her apartment in New York City. Lawrence died in 2000 in Seattle. He was a professor emeritus of art at the University of Washington. His artwork depicts moments of early American history and puts an emphasis on the experiences of Black people, Native American people, and also women. This panel is one of 30, and it will go on display Friday at the Seattle Art Museum, which is just opening up this weekend.
Man, so if you didn't have plans for the weekend, now you do.
There we go. I mean, what a beautiful story. And, honestly, his work is just phenomenal. I love his aesthetic and really the ways that he was able to depict kind of this intermediate struggle between, the Black experience, women. I mean, that's important. And shout out to all of the Jacob Lawrence fans. I know folks will be flocking to see that one, though.
No, and Jacob Lawrence, he passed away here in Seattle. Seattle loved Jacob Lawrence and his art. And so this would be great. A few things before we get out of here. Tomorrow, we got Mr. Nate Jackson. Some of you guys might have saw him last night on King 5 on Young Rock. He was on there last night. And so comedian, funny man Nate Jackson will be here tomorrow. Hopefully he ain't using them prepaid internet cards. And we get a good connection from Tacoma. And also you can catch Nate. He's hosting his own shows this weekend, March 4th through March 6th. So he'll be here tomorrow. I told him it was like that internet. He got a little hamster on a wheel down there. So
he's doing a hand crank. He got a hand crank
internet down there in the city of Destiny, huh?
One of the things I really love about Nate is he is so naturally funny. When he was doing his show, he literally asked folks. He's talking about Young Rock, and he was just like, "No, seriously, like, how many of y'all actually saw the show?" He's trying to make sure people are not just like, "Yeah, great job, Nate." He's like, "Nah, man,
really a good show."
Yeah, see, he's doing a great job on it, man.
No, they really did that show right. And then tomorrow in studio, well, actually via video link, we're joined again by Sean Good from Choose 180. I said yesterday it was today, but I just been off the whole week. But we've got Sean Good, and Sean Good's going to be talking about the recent Supreme Court ruling around simple possession. And so I asked him, I said, "You got anything to say about this?" "But I got a lot to say, Big O." "Oh, word." So he'll be here tomorrow. Before we get out of here, Trey Holiday, any last words?
You know what? I'm just going to say this. Anytime we can enjoy that sun during the month of March, let's do it, man. Get out, go for a walk. You know what I mean? Get some great fresh air. Take a walk with a neighbor, meet a new friend. That's what I'll say, man.
Meet a new friend.
Meet a new friend.
Mask up.
Yeah.
Tonight, 6:15, it's the coronavirus update show with producer Nikki Barron. So we got lots of updates there. Clearly, things are changing rapidly. And until then, just a reminder to go forward in your purpose and go forward in your humanity. Until tomorrow at 11 a.m. Peace.
Lift every voice and sing till earth in heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day.